Well, then analysts continue to express concern about the Russia invasion of Ukraine, saying it could lead to a global diplomatic fallout and a change in the balance of forces among the BRICS nations, of which Russia is a part. India has said very little. And as we saw earlier, China says it's refusing to call the developments an invasion, while South Africa is urging both sides to remain cool-headed. In Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro just concluded a 3-day trip to Russia. Joining us then to talk about the impact of this conflict on global diplomacy is Stellenbosch University Professor of Strategy in the Faculty of Military Science, Abel Esterhuyse. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to the program. Just how massive do you think the global impact from this fallout is likely to be?
Well, I think the immediate fallout might not be that big, but over a period of time and the implications it will have on the diplomacy, stability, the unfolding of strategic realities in the world in the next 5 to 10 years, it will have a definite massive impact.
How do the countries who are involved, especially those who are intervening parties, shall we call them, how do they limit the long-term effects of this and make sure that what's going on now does not escalate into a full-on war?
Well, it's an interesting question. Let me just make 2 points, perhaps, before we answer that question. The first point I have to make and I have to raise is the fact that this is perhaps Europe's darkest hour since the end of the Cold War. And how Europe is to deal with this problem will have a significant influence going forward and the role of Europe in the world in general in future. And then looking at Europe specifically, I think one has to make the point that this is perhaps the moment of truth for Germany, a country who has really been almost a silent partner in the world since the end of the Cold War. But it's now the moment for Germany, I think, in Europe to step up to the plate and for Germany to make a significant contribution to world peace.
You mentioned the Cold War, and I wonder how much events from history have to do or even clouding the route to a solution, a peaceful resolution to this present conflict.
Yeah, well, from that perspective, I want to look at it from perhaps a Russian perspective, because if you think about Putin and the collective memory of the Cold War in Russia, you add to that a strong element of Russian nationalism. You add to that the fact that Russia is perhaps ideologically and economically and from a leadership perspective, like South Africa, a very difficult country to govern, then the Cold War still features very prominently in what unfolded in the last day or two. I almost want to say what unfolded in the last 7, 8 years in the eastern part of the Ukraine, because we have been seeing this conflict in the making for a very long time. It actually started off with the situation around the peninsula in
Crimea, yes.
Yeah. So this has been long in the making, and the Cold War definitely featured. And more specifically, if you think about how Putin blamed this on the unmaking of the Cold War and how Europe and NATO in particular is sort of creeping onto Russia, then there's no doubt that this should, in a large part, be seen against the background of the Cold War.
We've got European leaders working now on a new raft of sanctions aimed at deterring Russian action. The last round announced earlier this week clearly did not have much impact, because we've seen this action from this morning, this invasion as some are calling it. Has Russia become sanction-proof, especially in the post-2014 confrontation period?
That's an interesting question, and well, let me make 2 points. The first is it normally takes quite a while for sanctions to take effect. So the immediate effect of sanctions and the sanctions imposed by the West will almost be zero. That's the first point to be made. The second point that I want to make is that Russia has restructured its economy. It shifted its economy away from engagement with the United States and Europe over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And so there's really questions that are being raised about the effect that sanctions may have on Russia, if at all. Let me just say this, that if you look at the invasion, it's quite interesting how Putin is portraying this and how he's wording this in terms of special operations, how he's wording this in terms of peace operations, how he's trying to keep what he's doing in the eastern part of Ukraine under the so-called conventional threshold. So he's trying to downplay this in a way. And of course, part of downplaying it is keeping the media out of the equation. And he's not doing what the West and the United States typically would have done in a situation like this, where we've become known to the so-called CNN wars and the spectator sport wars, if I can put it like that. We've seen almost no footage of Russian forces in the eastern part of the Ukraine as yet. We know they are there, and we know they are busy with operations, but it is being done under the media threshold, and it's being done under the conventional threshold, which makes it a very interesting type of operation.
Just on the Russian explanation for this announced operation, as they are terming it, a military operation in eastern Ukraine, they say it's meant to defend people in the separatist region, i.e. Donetsk, Luhansk, and the rest of it, because they accuse the Ukrainians of violating the rights of people who are in those areas, including Russians who are there. Is there any truth to the fact that Ukraine itself has been an aggressor in that area?
Well, we need to understand that truth is normally the first casualty in any war. And what we are seeing is, without doubt, an effort from Russia's side to control the narrative and to control the media and to control what is being said by whom about the war. And by doing that, Putin and Russia is also very successful. They are very successful in putting the West and NATO in particular in a reactive mode. And so they react to what Putin is doing the whole time. And let me say this about President Putin. He is not only an unpredictable kind of character, but he is reading the situation very carefully. And everything that he has done so far in the eastern part of the Ukraine has been done in a very thoughtful manner, has been very well planned. So he is somebody that is cautious, he's unpredictable, but is doing it in a very well planned and very deliberate manner.
Thank you, sir. That's Professor Abel Esterhuyse speaking to us about developments in eastern Ukraine.